Before you pick an armor plate, you're going to want to watch this video. So I'm going to go through some of the most common questions and the most common concerns that you might have when you're looking for armor to wear. Personal body armor, and I'm really talking about hard armor plates. I'm going to let the camera run and I'm going to talk. And if you find something helpful, that's great. I hope it does help you. I've been doing this a while. Other people in the industry won't share quite so much information, but I'm going to. What am I most concerned about in the industry right now? I'm most concerned about the lack of transparency. Let me tell you what I mean. When you buy an armor plate from a marketplace online, eBay, for example, and they tell you that your RF3 or level 4 plate, and by the way, when I say RF3 in this video, this is the new designation, the new protection level for the level 4 category under the NIJ 010106. So what I mean for most people is a level 4 plate when I say RF3. So when you go to eBay or another marketplace and you pick an armor plate, and it's an RF3 plate, it will have a 1-inch foam edge on the outer periphery. Okay, so if you took the covers off of this plate, you would have a 1-inch edge all the way around it. This makes the plate lighter because the foam is not as heavy as the ceramic. So when you see an armor plate that's 6.2 pounds, that's an RF3 protection level, a light bulb should go off in your brain and say, hey, this has a foam edge. And that foam edge makes the plate unbelievably light. Now, some of you ask me, well, why is your plate 7.9 pounds and your competitor's plate is 6.2 pounds? That's exactly why. Because our ceramic will go all the way out to the edge of the plate. Now, obviously, I'm not going to sell you one like this. I'm just pretend that damage isn't there. This was recently tested. But I'm going to bring the ceramic all the way out to the edge of the backer. Okay, all the way out, top, bottom, left, and right. I'm not going to sell you something like this and call it an edge-to-edge plate. We're going to bring it on out, unless it's designed differently. We're going to bring it on out to the edge of the polyethylene. And that makes for more ceramic coverage. And that additional ceramic coverage is heavy. So you cannot equate one plate to another because they're completely different layups, completely different ceramic coverages. So if your seller or your manufacturer is being truthful, then they will disclose this edge in their materials. And we have 1 or 2 plates, imported versions of our plates that we sell that are super cheap but reliable, that do have this retracted strike face, we call it. This is the strike face of the armor. This is where the projectile hits. And a retracted strike face means that it does not go all the way to the edge. And you need to know how much retracted strike face you have or how much edge you have here. Because 1 inch all the way around the periphery will drop 2 pounds off of an aluminum oxide or alumina ceramic plate, which is the most common ceramic material that is used in ceramic body armor. And that's because it's affordable and it's easy to work with. So a 1/2 inch edge out here will still drop the plate weight by a pound. And it's a little disconcerting for sellers and manufacturers trying to do the right thing because most people don't understand this issue and they automatically assume that a 6.2 pound plate is better, lighter, more advanced than a 7.9 or an 8 pound plate. So if you build a ceramic armor plate properly, this is just a guideline, but if you build a ceramic armor plate properly and an appropriate backer material that is actually 10 by 12, you will be around the 8 pound point for an alumina tile. If you're not at 8 pounds for your alumina level 4 RF3 plate, then there's something else going on. Okay, now this is assuming a quality, high quality tile and an appropriate backer. And what do I mean by appropriate? I mean, it's going to give you some redundancy after the first shot. So it, you know, real thin polyethylene backers may be able to take one shot, but they may not be able to take two and avoid a complete penetration or exceed the 44 millimeter back face deformation maximum that is allowable by the NIJ. So remember, the guideline is mid 7s to 8-ish for a well-built alumina armor plate. Well, you could say, well, some of the big guys in the industry, they have alumina armor that weighs less than 8 pounds, and that's true. But some of them are 8 pounds or slightly over. And the difference between these models, there's a couple of things that people can do or manufacturers can do to drive down the weight on an alumina plate, whether it's single curve or multi-curve. Now, what is the difference? A single curve plate curves in one direction. It curves this way against your body in a horizontal curve like this. Okay, you can see it does not have a vertical curve. It's a straight plate, and that's a pretty good wear, but it really results in some distance here up by your collarbone notch, and that is where the top of your plate needs to be. So for a better fit, some people like to wear the multi-curve plate, and you can see that this plate curves back vertically. See that vertical curve? And it's curved this way. It's curved this way, and it's curved this way. And so whether it's a multi-curve plate or a single curve plate, there are things that manufacturers can do to lighten the plate. And one of the things that they can do is reduce the drop protection on the plate. And what do I mean by that? Well, when you test armor, you're supposed to test it in accordance with NIJ 06 or 07 now is the current release of ballistic standards. You're supposed to protect it so that when it falls or when it's dropped on the ground, it's protected. So when they take and they put this on a stand and they put 10 pounds of clay on it, and it's a hinge drop mechanism, and it drops on a concrete block. Well, the strike face has to be protected so that it doesn't break. Most people that do not run certified armor will reduce that that drop protection. We call it crack arresting layers, and so that they get rid of, you know, anywhere between 3 ounces and 6 ounces of weight right off the bat. That is a problem, because now you have a nice light plate, but you've got to be super careful with it. You don't drop it because you could compromise it if it cracks. This is a very, very, very common issue I've seen. And this comes from the big guys too. This comes from people that know better, but they do it anyway. They take the crack arresters off, they run the plate thin, and it's not really certifiable. A lot of people say, well, you should only buy from people that have 1 or 2 plates in their inventory that's certified because it proves that they can build proper armor. Well, that's not necessarily a reason to buy from these people, because it doesn't mean that they make their non-certified armor with proper crack arresters. And I've seen it over and over again. I don't want to name any names because it's, you know, people would, this is just my opinion out of one person out of millions, okay? So take it with a grain of salt, but the one way that they can lighten up a plate below 8 pounds in an aluminum configuration is to reduce the drop protection. And it happens all the time with many models. So the second way is that they reduce the overall size of the armor. So alumina is heavy. I mean, I say heavy, but it is demonstrably heavy when you add even the slightest bit of weight out here to the edge. If you had a 9.5 by 11.5 inch plate, you would be a lot lighter, because then they can watch out for you for these issues, and we can explain all of the issues. Because when you're the one offering the quality product, when you're the one offering the 98, 99, 99.7% alumina tile purity, then you have to explain it to your customers and watch out for your customers, because they're being drawn in by all of these tricks of the trade, I will call it. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but there are elements in the strategy behind building and designing armor. These are the things that people do, that manufacturers will do. They will change the size of the strike face. They will call a 9.75 by 11.75 a 10 by 12, give you a measured size in fine print, and you don't realize that that's making 6, 7, 8 ounces worth of weight difference. They remove the crack arresters so that if the plate is dropped, it's going to crack, but they're making it 3, 4, 5 ounces lighter. So if you do both of those, you shave a little bit off the size, you remove the crack arrestor off of a properly designed plate, now you've dropped almost a pound off a properly designed alumina plate, ceramic plate. You can do it with other material too, silicon carbide. You can do it the same way. That's the other way they do it. Now, let's talk about the last way that, and there are other issues, but these are the main issues. Tile purity makes a huge difference in weight. If you take this ceramic strike face, this happens to be from Bitassi in Italy. And by the way, most major armor manufacturers use this company. When you look on testing videos on YouTube and you see this stripe and this writing, this is a Bitassi tile. So all of the components for an armor plate are not made in America, even though you are telling customers, even though these companies are telling customers that they're made in America, they're assembled, they're bonded in America. They are getting some of their components outside the country, and that's completely okay. But it is, though, another another thing that needs to be discussed, because the current U.S. law regarding the Made in America claim really says, and we do this on our site, it really, you have to qualify your Made in America claim. Like this, if you were to advertise this product, you would say Made in America with Italian ballistic tile. To qualify your Made in America claim, especially when it is more than half of the weight or the components of your plate. So plate purity has a huge impact on armor plate weight. If you took any tile and you reduced the crack arrestor, you reduced the size a little bit, and you reduced the purity level, now you're down to a pound and a half lighter than a properly designed alumina ballistic plate. Running lower purity alumina is not a problem because it saves on weight, and as long as it works in the armor system, it's fine. The problem is that the material itself at 90% is not as homogeneous as a higher purity plate. When you don't have alumina in the plate to the highest extent possible, then you run the chances of having some areas that are not as resistant, and you introduce variability into the design. This is just my opinion. So that's why we start with the premise that we're going to go as high in quality, high in purity as possible. We're going to put everything on the customer's side, everything on the risk mitigation side. Nothing wrong with that other strategy, but I'm explaining to you why armor is different weights. Okay, that's our focus. And I'll also take this opportunity to tell you that this manufacturer is what most people use, most manufacturers use in the United States. All the big names, to some extent, have a Battasi strike face. Battasi is a high quality alumina tile. It is probably the highest quality alumina in the world, except for some specialty ceramics companies in China. Tested tile from all over the world. And we can tell you that a 99% tile in alumina is probably the best that the world has to offer right now in terms of stopping RF 1, 2, and 3 threats. What it will not stop mostly are the tungsten threats. So you have to go up to silicon carbide strike face for that. So this is your alumina, this is your silicon carbide, and you can feel that this is about 20% lighter than alumina. Silicon carbide is nice because it's light and it will stop in proper thickness with proper armor system development. It can stop tungsten core ammunition. Alumina has a really hard time with that. Some of the light tungsten threats can be stopped with a thick enough alumina tile, but the problem is that the tungsten is harder than the tile itself. So, but if you're talking about NIJ, RF1, RF2, RF3, alumina is a great choice. So going back to the conversation about tile, the reduction in purity of alumina tile is a tremendous way to drop weight. So when you have a model that is 7 poundish in alumina, what has been done, I guarantee it, what has been done is that you don't have quite a 10 by 12 actual ceramic strike face. You don't have the crack arresters on the front in proper thickness to protect the armor if it's dropped in accordance with NIJ 07 drop criteria. And the purity of the tile is down around 90%. And that's how an armor goes, an aluminum armor plate goes from 8 down to 7 in a 10 by 12 configuration. So reminder to ask questions. You can ask about purity. They'll probably say it's proprietary, but always check the size that they're advertising versus a measured size. Okay, and at least you can check the size even if you can't check the purity level. You could check the drop protection by asking them for an NIJ certified lab test report that shows the mechanical drop testing in the test reports, usually up near the top in the notes section. and make sure that, here's an important part, make sure that the test report weight that they give you that indicates that mechanical testing was done, make sure that that weight matches the plate that you're buying. So make sure if you're buying a 7.5 pound aluminum level 4 or RF3 plate, make sure that you read the NIJ lab test report and that it was mechanically tested and that it's 7.5 pounds. Okay, because sometimes you could drop test a heavier plate with proper crack arresters, then remove the crack arresters and sell it as the same plate. So we don't want to do that. To recap what we talked about from a design standpoint, we talked about the slightly smaller size, we talked about lack of crack arresters, we talked about purity, and the recap here on the phone, make sure that you're getting an edge-to-edge plate if that's what you want, because an edge-to-edge plate will be much heavier than one that has a 1-inch foam edge. Now, as you can see here, there are also different types of ceramic. You have what's called a ceramic tile array, and these ceramic tile arrays are pieces of ceramic, usually 50 millimeters, that are placed into a pattern like that. And that pattern is assembled together and sold usually in a single curve format like that. That is a very common way of doing armor. Now that's fine if that retracted strike face is disclosed, if this backer resists at least the HG2 level or the old NIJ3A level. So there is a way to design an armor plate where you over rely on the ceramic strike face, and then you have a weaker backer that cannot withstand at HG2 under the 07 standard. You have to make sure you ask for test reports on the backer by itself. The backer by itself should resist at HG2. That way, if you're working in law enforcement and you're walking up to the car and you take a pistol round through the edge, it's going to stop it. Okay, so this is like a hybrid type of armor, if it's disclosed, where the edge of the plate is resistant at the HG2 level. Is it the best arrangement? I don't know. That's something that you have to answer for yourself. Now, versus the ceramic tile array, the ceramic tile array is very good at multiple hit resistance, because each tile acts independently from one another, and when a projectile goes in, you can see in some of my other videos, a single tile is usually impacted. This hit on a seam between three different seam lines, and it damaged a little bit larger area, and it's also because it's silicon carbide, it's more brittle than aluminum. But usually with an aluminum tile, and you have a projectile that comes in here, it really only damages mostly one tile if the plate is built properly with adhesives between the tile, etc., etc. So a ceramic tile array is better in general at multiple hits depending on shot spacing. They can accept hits, multiple hits that are closer together than if you were to use a monolithic plate. Anything wrong with monolithic? Not really. Monolithics have the advantage of having a first shot advantage because of the continuity of the tile. It will dissipate the first shot energy better than a ceramic tile array, and it will have a lower back face deformation on the first shot. The problem is that the monolithics, once that shot goes in, you get cracking throughout, a weakness throughout the plate, and you'll see larger spall circles on the back side of the strike face. And usually those spall circles that come off with the ballistic energy are anywhere between 4 and 6 inches across. So you get a 2 to 3 inch spall circle on a ceramic tile array, but you get 30, 40, 50% more spall on a monolithic. That's good in terms of energy transference. However, it's bad for multiple hits. I mean, I say bad, but there are plenty of monolithics, when they're designed right, they can take a bunch of hits. It doesn't change the physics though. The spall circles are larger. Inside of those spall circles, you have thinner ceramic, and that thinner ceramic can't resist at the same level. So the disadvantage with the ceramic tile array is that each one of these tile are only 2 inches. So when a projectile hits here, all the energy is transferred through that small area into the backing material. And that means that thrust of energy through the backing material, through that 2 inch tile, means that you have to overbuild the polyethylene backer. And so the backer will be thicker normally on a ceramic tile array. The backer should be thicker than the backer on a monolithic plate. If you're, to simplify the monolithic array debate, if you're more interested in that first shot protection and having as low back face deformation as possible, then you go with the monolithic. That's our model 0425. If you're interested in multiple hits, but you will have to put up with a little bit heavier plate, then you go with a ceramic tile array. Those are really the considerations. There are other things to talk about between the two designs. However, that is the main one. It's a multiple hits advantage for the ceramic tile array, the single shot advantage for the monolithic. Wow, that was a long video. See you later.